pleasure to be here. Craig called me, I don't know, four weeks ago and invited me, and I'm on day 10 of a 13-day stretch where I'm living out of a suitcase, so he really had to talk me into coming here today. And he said, well, I'm going to be here. All right. The secretary's going to be there. That's impressive. And then I realized it's Monroe County, and Sharon Folsey, who is the best county board supervisor in the entire state, is from Monroe County, and Sharon's on my board. And when I knew Sharon was going to be here, I said, all right, another suitcase day is just fine. I was in D.C. last 3 days, and I was supposed to get back at 9:30, but if any of you've watched the weather or the news, they had some tornadoes there. So I slept much of the night in Reagan Airport on the floor and got in about 1:30 this morning. So if I'm a little punchy, I apologize. And actually, when you're sitting on an airport floor, you get to think about a lot of things. And I thought, what the heck am I going to talk about today? So I'm going to try to wrap in a story that I think makes a lot of sense. And trust me, it pertains to transportation. So when I go to D.C., I love D.C. It's pretty dysfunctional, but I love going there because I'm into history, military history in particular, and I try to get to a site and learn about a site whenever I'm there. And they have monuments throughout D.C. You all that have been to D.C. know that. And I'll pick a little one or pick a big one. I didn't get to do that this time, but when you fly in, you can always see Arlington. And that's probably my favorite place to go just because I revere it so much. And another one of my favorite cemetery battlefields is Gettysburg. I've been there 5 times. And there's a story associated with Gettysburg that does pertain to transportation. So any of you who follow that part of history know that on the 3rd day of the battle, Lee hadn't been beaten at this point. On the 3rd day of the battle, he decides he's going to go front and center at the Union Army. And his idea was, we're going to split them in 2, flank them, and then it's over. And at that point, he would have had a straight road to Washington, and the Confederacy, quite honestly, would have won at that point. So this is a turning point in the war. And on that 3rd day, he decides to go front and center, which we know now was a bad choice, and he sends 12,500 soldiers up the hill, and the Union was on Cemetery Ridge. They had the high ground. It's always harder to attack uphill. And he sends 12,500 of them in that direction. Half of them don't make it. And they hit a place that now has a monument, and they call it the high water mark. This high water mark is where they really got to. And they actually had broken the Union line for a very short period of time. And they refer to it not only as the high water mark of the Gettysburg battle, but also of the Confederacy. Because after that, although the war lasted a couple of more years, it was all downhill for the Confederacy at that point. And I was thinking, that does pertain to the situation we have in Wisconsin right now, because we have had what I thought were high water marks with regard to lack of infrastructure investment in the state of Wisconsin. And every time I think we've hit a high water mark of lack of infrastructure investment, we seem to move to another high water mark in some cases. So a couple of years ago, I thought we'd hit the high water mark, and the commission came out with some great recommendations. And we came out with, the secretary came out with a budget that we very much supported, and we thought we had hit the high water mark, but we hadn't quite hit the high water mark, and there was a proposal by the governor that we weren't all that fond of, and the Joint Finance Committee, thankfully, got us to a better place. And I thought that was the high water mark, and we were moving in the right direction. And a couple of weeks ago, we had what we thought was going to be a bill that was easily going to pass the Assembly, AB 210, which all it really did was allow counties to pass a referendum on their own, ask their own voters to pass a referendum to put in a 0.5% sales tax that would have been completely appropriated to transportation, maintenance, rehabilitation, not building new roads, just treading water, keeping us where we're at. And the speaker did a great job. Speaker Voss did a great job. He teed it up, thought we had the votes, and it died in the end. And the secretary said we can't make this a southeast versus the rest of the state, and I completely agree. We have to make certain that we invest in all areas of the state, because we can't have great capillaries and bad arteries, or vice versa. But the fact of the matter is that from a political standpoint, we've had some challenges with our southeast Wisconsin friends. And that proved problematic in that particular scenario as well. So now we've moved the high water mark in that scenario just a little bit further. So I hope now that is the high water mark, and we now move in the right direction. And that's where we need all of you, and Craig's going to talk about a campaign here to help us make sure that we've now hit the high water mark. And I want to talk about a couple of high water marks in towns that we hope are indeed the high water marks. Not far from here, Sharon's partner in, which district are you, which number? District 2, Steve Dickinson. He's up in Jackson County. His town, he's one of my, two of my 12 directors that have a replacement schedule of what I'll call infinity. In his town, he has about 50 miles of road. Given the current ability to raise revenue at the town level, given current general transportation aids, they will never build a new road. And when I say new, rehabilitate. They will never grind, remill, reshape, and put in new blacktop in that town. Their replacement schedule is infinity. There is a town that is about, as a crow flies, 20 miles from where I live. And they just doubled their levy at a town meeting, which towns under a certain population can do. They doubled their levy so that their replacement schedule went from 80 years to 40 years. Okay? We have a town in St. Croix County, northwest Wisconsin. They have, I think, one of the most sophisticated town capital improvement plans that we have in towns. I mean, they know when each and every shingle needs to be replaced on every building. It's very sophisticated. Their replacement schedule right now, given the current funding scheme, is 300 years. So if, quite honestly, and this sounds like hyperbole, but it's not, if you live as long as Moses, you'll be able to get a new road once in a lifetime. Now, that's problematic because our economy is very dependent, as the secretary said, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, in this area, sand mines. When you look at your website and all the businesses that are sponsors of your Economic Development Corporation, they're right in that wheelhouse. Sand, agriculture, dairy, cranberries. Everything relies heavily on both those big arteries and those local capillaries. So economic development is so dependent on transportation. And my fear is, if we don't make this the high water mark where we're at right now, that flanking maneuver that Lee tried to make is the flanking maneuver that will happen in our economy. If we do not make investments, we are at a threshold, I believe, where we are going to be flanked by others. Other states are investing in transportation. Other states are doing what we have heretofore not done enough of. And I'm afraid that if we don't do that, we're going to be flanked. Now, that's all bad news. I think the good news is that we have a set of legislators, and many in the room right now, that are very willing to work on this. In the Assembly, when the heat of the battle occurred, we had a group come together that defended cuts to local roads. We had a group of senators that held strong with us throughout, and I think we were almost there. We've got a secretary that is extraordinarily supportive of moving forward and making sure we don't get flanked. I think we're very, very close, and I know Craig's going to tell you about a campaign I'm very excited about, and I won't steal his thunder. But we need your help in that campaign to make sure we move the ball forward, move the needle forward, and not get flanked.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll get to that campaign soon, but right now, Jack, you and your 71 fellow highway commissioners around Wisconsin take care of about 53,000 miles of state and federal, or state and county highways. Come up here and tell us about the persistent problems you face every day in your job.